how much do I think hip hop influences people? I think hip hop has a great influence on people. It's there. Hip hop captures so many different moods. Like I go back to the first hip hop song that I heard, "Rapper's Delight," and I remember the first Thanksgiving my family experienced after that song was popular. So I was 10 years old, and I remember all the little kids, at this Thanksgiving party. We were all like seeing who knew all the lyrics to the song. Have you ever been to a friend's house to eat and the food just ain't no good? The macaroni soggy, peas all mushed. I mean, like it was just such a funny story. And so as little kids, it was different. It was definitely different than even like the Michael Jackson songs or Evelyn Champagne King or Chic or whatever else it was that we were listening to at the time. It was something different about the storytelling. It was so much more personal. I seem to like really understand the storyline more. And it's funny too, because like, and maybe within that same time frame, like, or a couple years later, Rick James had a song like Super Freak. And you think about the lyrics of Super Freak, and she's a very kinky girl, and all these things that he's talking about in that song. And to be honest, I never honed in on what he was singing about, even though the lyrics are in your face. But something about hip hop was different. It was more so maybe because it was closer to talking than singing, or something about the storytelling was just really engaging. And I think back about songs from that era. And just how much the lyrics really stood out more than other genres. So from that standpoint, I definitely think that hip hop lyrically has really had an impact on people, because like the lyrics are more in your face. So I think with the various moods, whether it's a happy mood, I think hip hop helps in that way. If it's an upset, angry mood, I think people gravitate to those instances. And I think Tupac is a perfect example of that, because we saw all these emotions in his music, whether he was really happy and playful in songs like I Get Around, or very empathetic and kind of somber and sad in a song like Dear Mama, where he's talking about just what it was like being raised by his mother. And then when he was angry, like you take a song like Hit 'Em Up or something, and some of his diss records. And I think like in all those instances, though we could go to those songs for different moods. It kind of puts you in a different mind space. So I think hip hop has really had a huge influence on how people feel because of that. And I think that's one reason why people gravitate to the songs and have such a strong connection with them, and particular artists, especially if you really identify with a particular artist and their storyline and the things that they talk about all the time. It's like your go-to. And I think we've just seen so many examples of this over the years in hip hop. So I think it's a huge influence in that regard. And also it's impacted so many different things, like style, the way people dress. Like, so if you go back to the 70s or before, and it was different, like especially in the world of black music. So you might have the Motown era where the Supremes were wearing these elegant gowns all the time, and all those the Four Tops and Smokey Robinson and the Miracles, they were wearing suits and things like that. And so I would think that would have had an effect on people when they went out, and so forth. Or then you had like Parliament and the Funkadelic, and they had all these elaborate costumes, and Earth, Wind and Fire and things like that. But hip hop, it more so had a more down to earth kind of street attire look that anyone could adopt. Like maybe some of these other looks weren't necessarily practical, like how many people are going to dress up, like George Clinton or something. And so I think hip hop has had a huge impact on fashion, and that's the reason why we have so many hip hop artists who created their own fashion lines, because they've seen the influence and they know that their fans want to dress like them, and so they've been able to use this as a vehicle to make money and everything. So I think there are like tons of ways that it's had an impact. And I know misogyny comes up a lot too, because in hip hop there's oftentimes there's a lot of the way women are discussed in the music is something that is considered controversial, and there's a belief that I don't know if all of these messages makes or encourages the fans to take on the same kind of mindset, but I guess it could be argued that it doesn't help if women are always referred to, in a negative, in a negative way. If women are always referred to as sex objects, etc. Not considered equal, etc. I don't think that would encourage, the fans to have more respect for women. But it's not. But by the same token, like, you take a person like me who, I've listened to all this stuff for years, and I mean, I feel like I'm very respectful of women. I don't think that, I've ever, I have the urge to refer to women in some type of negative way because I listen to this music. So I think everyone is different, in that regard. So, but I definitely think in a lot of ways, hip hop has had a huge influence on the people who listen to the music. Mm-hmm.
So have you seen the products of hip-hop's negative influence over the years?
I definitely have seen some negative things in the culture that encompasses, the hip-hop community, that I feel like it can be deduced that these things, that hip-hop had an influence on it. Like, for instance, in hip-hop, there's lots and lots of conversation about recreational drug use. So their references to smoking weed is so common, like no one ever mentions smoking weed as if it's taboo or something you shouldn't do. It's just like, it's totally condoned, right? So I feel like if you're a kid who's kind of interested in smoking weed and you listen to a lot of hip hop, like, hip hop is saying, like, go for it. There's nothing wrong to do it. I mean, there are plenty of album covers that have feature marijuana on it. Guys are talking about it every time. I feel like probably every hip hop record, mainstream hip hop record, like, has at least one reference to smoking marijuana or getting high on there. You have people that are talking about, drinking codeine, mixing codeine with whatever and drinking that stuff, and so and I actually have a podcast with my wife. We review music from a parent's perspective, and we interviewed someone who did a documentary on the scissor, the codeine thing, and so he had gone to college campuses and said, like, it was just so prevalent, like, even on college campuses, that people were doing it, and he felt that it was a correlation to how much is celebrated in the music. So I think definitely in terms of recreational drug use, it's the norm in hip hop. It's definitely not taboo. So I definitely think that anyone who would kind of be interested in that would definitely be encouraged to indulge, because it's so celebrated. And I know we talked a little bit about misogyny, but I think that's, probably one thing. I mean, hip hop really does not celebrate, like, does not celebrate being monogamous, not even marriage. I mean, there's, I interviewed this artist, Murs, actually for the podcast, and he talked about that because he had a song where he was talking about, like, infidelity, in marriage, and he talks a lot about, his relationship in his music, and I'm not this is a fictional story, but in talking about marriage, and he said he just wanted to talk about these things, and he actually was very surprised as a fan of certain legendary artists that, like, he didn't know that they were married. They never talked about that, and he just wanted to be more relatable and talk about things that people were really dealing with, instead of just speaking from the mindset of a person who's single and just out partying all the time and living that lifestyle. So I thought that was awesome that he would do that. But because I definitely think in terms of the way that hip hop talks about the relationship, like, it's not about monogamy. It's just about being free and doing whatever you want and having as many relationships as you want to have. And I feel like that would have an impact on people who listen to it. Not everyone, but I think there'd be some people that would feel like, well, why should I, settle down when all my heroes, like, they have as many girls as they want. I could do that. I could do that too.
Do you think in light of that negative influence, it's that much more important for Christian artists to have an influence in hip hop?
Yeah, I believe in a balance. So as much as I listen to hip hop that's, doesn't promote any positivity, I think it should definitely be balanced with artists who have, something substantive to say. And I am that much more excited whenever I hear like a song, whether it's from a Christian artist or not, that celebrates, a perspective, a value that I identify with. Like I I really celebrate that and I appreciate it because I feel like I'm not on an island. I know my circle of friends and we have common beliefs. But yeah, a lot of times when I'm listening to a rap song, I'm into it because I like the way that they rap. I like the wordplay. I like the production and all those things. But like in terms of the lyrical content, like I just do not identify, with. And so when I hear a song that I can identify